Alex Ansary here. It is March 23rd, 2016. In this video, I'm going to talk about the WE, formerly known as the WF, and its role in mind control and the global conspiracy. But before I do that, what I want to say is this. To those of you that are younger, older, never doubt yourself. To give you a little bit of motivation. This is actually a subject, what I'm about to share, that I started talking about several years ago. And there were some videos that I never uploaded. I thought, that people weren't ready for it. They weren't ready for that type of a perspective on what's called professional wrestling. And I think the tide has turned, so to speak. I think that in recent years there's just been an explosion of others on YouTube that are starting to connect the dots, and I say starting to connect the dots on how the WE shaped minds for the establishment and how there are wrestlers out there that understand the mind control of the WE and how to have ego. A lot of these guys have never really blown the whistle on what they've seen behind closed doors. We've heard about the steroid scandals. We've heard about the sex scandals. We've heard about these guys claim they were ripped off by Vince McMahon. We've heard these guys speak out of ego. We haven't heard these wrestlers speak about what they really know. People like the Ultimate Warrior. I've seen everything the Ultimate Warrior ever put out. I've seen all his rants about Hulk Hogan and all these other allegations, and it's what he didn't say and why. It's what he didn't say about Vince McMahon. He always spoke just on his own behalf, his own ego attached to the Ultimate Warrior. I respect this person. I think he's put out some interesting philosophies. I also think he's also gotten really big-headed, especially when he was doing the political speeches around 2003 and 2004. I always want to see somebody like the Warrior and others, when our nation was going to war, speaking like a real tough guy against the lies the establishment was pushing. And where was Jesse then? Jesse Ventura, another showman. But without digressing and going into that area, what I want to say here is that I should have put out those videos years ago. So never doubt yourself and your own information, your own suspicions. Because years might pass and you might realize that things you thought were going on years ago are going on. And what I've also noticed in my little introduction here is how some of the things that I've already said about the WE has already alerted the WE. One video I put out using footage, there was a complaint, a strike on this channel that came from the WE headquarters. And in that clip from 2010, I'm showing footage and commentating at a desk, doing box and box, and they had my clip pulled down. And I was discussing the WE mind control to where, it's gone from hero to villain to now small-time villain versus a real bad motherfucker. And we really saw this in the late 80s and 90s. Ultimate Warrior took part in it. Rick Rude took part in it. Hogan took part in it. Macho Man Randy Savage took part in it. Those Golden Era wrestlers took part in it. And other wrestlers took part in it. And we're talking about body slamming women. We're talking about beating women up in the stage, domestic violence, being promoted before a world audience with a roaring fan of young men and women that are having their minds turned to butter. I've talked in other videos about the hero versus villain complex way of doing things changed around the time of the 1990s, and people were being raw is war, war is raw. Violence, death, and the destruction. New World Order. Hulk Hogan, then 9/11, and boom, off to the races. A lot of those kids that were watching wrestling back in the days, now fucking Marines for the U.S. military industrial complex. Literally, as a young person, I could see this rising. How they were directing male testosterone, staging realities, but also creating a police state to catch some of those would-be criminals, would-be tough guys, thinking they can get away with some of that stuff that's being projected on screen. Oh yeah, hit that guy with the chain. Hit that guy with the garbage can. Yeah, find out what Measure 11 is in Oregon. And so, you have actually several generations of young men that have had their minds fucked by the so-called professional wrestling, including the mind fucking of the UFC, which is another topic. Beat a man while he's down on the ground. hop on them and try to hump them. Like, what is this homoerotic bullshit where you don't respect your opponent? But it's the don't respect your opponent, be a bad villain, be a badder dude than that other dude, and you'll get on top and the ladies will love you. And that is a consistent pattern that you'll see with today's so-called professional wrestling and the UFC. Now, the new logo of the UFC, the face of the demon, that's its own discussion. When we go from hero to villain, and that whole era of professional wrestling from the 80s to the 90s, you see Vince McMahon inserting himself more and more as the friggin' devil, Lucifer. That's right. He's openly taking roids now. He's openly a monster. Oh, he brings Stephanie out. He brings his family out. What kind of person brings his own family out on the theater floor and show your own family madness, where you reenact the actual dysfunctional behaviors taking place behind the scenes, which is another strangeness of WWE scripting. The scripting of dysfunctional scenes, domestic violence, problems, conflict, brother versus brother, brother stabbing brother in the back, hey brother, and all these different variants of the brother versus brother and the man versus woman, and these different variants of the mindfuck, multiple decades of this mindfuck. We don't need to go and just focus on the Iron Sheik and the Russian guy and all that nationalism or just domestic violence. From every conceivable angle, the big boss man, the cop's going to put you in jail. Look over here, it's the big boss man versus Hulk Hogan. And some wrestling outfits have made use of the Middle Eastern extremist radical card. I actually contacted a supposed professional wrestler. And they are involved in heavy physical activity that cannot be discounted. I just don't have a lot of respect for a Middle Eastern person that will actually play the role of the Middle Eastern radical, because some corporate wrestling entity is actually paying him to do that and go Alibaba, Alibaba, death to America. But if you look on YouTube, you'll find that that card's been played out. So a lot of these soldiers of today's day and age that have been duped into these foreign conflicts, when they were young, they were watching Hogan and Warrior. They were watching Jake the Snake. And I'll tell you what, listen, I have done so much analysis of the golden era of TV professional wrestling that I feel like this is what gives me that extra insight into the mind control aspects. The reason why is because there is an aspect of that era of wrestling that I do consider to be entertaining and better than, say, the current era of wrestling, which I won't watch. Super dark, super villainous, more promotion of domestic violence and stuff that can get you put away for a long time, not to mention the death rituals and the Undertaker, Dark Mask, Sting of WCW type characters, other groups and names I'm not familiar with, names with destruction, fire and brimstone, characters straight from hell itself. Like the Road Warriors came out of the 80s, and the Legion of Doom and other kind of cool characters. The Golden Era, Ultimate Warrior. Okay, the Hercules, the $1 Million Man. I'm a rich guy. I'm a heel. You hate me because I stuff dollar bills down people. I represent something. That world of greed and... See, it was clear in a certain period of the Golden Era who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. And they just really, for a few years then, really started to incorporate the heavy acting to where it became required for wrestlers to be at a certain level of acting, but it wasn't just that. You have an era to where many wrestlers will say it was required to be on a certain amount of anabolic steroids. Now things have gotten complicated with different grades of steroids and human growth hormone, which artificially induced, that is, the injections, which is a different thing. I see not only the mind control of the public at the hands of Vince McMahon and those WWF wrestlers that won't fess up to the role they played in the mind control. It's how those men themselves allowed their bodies to be raped by their involvement in professional wrestling. and how to this day so many of those wrestlers have yet to wake up and be real tough guys and men and speak out against what that system even does to wrestlers. How it eats you up and chews you out, spits you out, being fed a script to play a role to get a certain reaction from the public, and how much darker it's gotten. Now, wrestlers have admitted that they're aware of it. Goldstein, for example, claims, whether it's true or not, who knows? He claims he's not involved in professional wrestling because he doesn't want to simulate the beating of women. The $1 million Vince McMahon, or the $1 million man, has referred to Vince McMahon as the devil. And I refer to Vince, and I've never met him, but just reading his energy, it's clear he's possessed by some sort of an entity. And he's involved with probably more than what we're aware of. And so was his father. And there's stuff dealing with him being a blue blood and a Mason, and also abuse in the McMahon household as a child that somehow affected his brain. Somehow, some way, that trauma, what he saw, the domestic violence that McMahon witnessed and or experienced, somehow or another playing a role in where he's taken the WWF. But I don't think that Vince McMahon, just like Eric Prince of Blackwater and other powerful people, I don't believe that Vince McMahon achieved the level of success on his own, or that he is putting out mind control for his own interests. He has been used as a tool, just like many other media outlets and companies have been used as a tool. And where are the wrestlers that are speaking out that really know the truth, talking about what's really going on, instead of just their own little problems and how Vince McMahon screwed them and how they ended up on painkillers and how they saw young ring boys harassed by Pat Patterson and other pedophiles in the late 70s and 80s. Yes, we know about all that stuff. Yes, we know about the secretary that sued Vince McMahon, claiming sexual harassment, claiming he was trying to force her to do certain things on him, Bill Clinton style. What about the real juice? Well, here's what we know. We know there's a whole lot of dead wrestlers out there, and a whole lot of answers that haven't been, a whole lot of questions that haven't been answered. And one could say, yes, it was painkillers, drug abuse, and their way of life in each of these circumstances. And then, of course, there are other perspectives. There are questions that have been raised about the death of Chris Benoit. There are other things and conclusions that maybe people can come to. For example, you do see the role that the WWF has played in mind control over the masses. And you do see how some of these men have been used as slaves and their bodies abused. Certain unfortunate things happening to some of these wrestlers as a result of their involvement with Vince McMahon, also known as the devil of professional wrestling. It's like a deal with the devil. Literally, we may literally be looking at a test case of men making a deal with the devil, i.e. Vince McMahon, and the energetic consequences. We look at the case of Jake the Snake Roberts. We look at the case of several others. By the way, Snuka accused of murdering his girlfriend in 1983, but back to Jake the Snake Roberts, abused as a child, entering into professional wrestling when he was undergoing his own mental health crisis, wanted to be a big bad guy because his dad beat him up. So he thinks he's going to simulate this big bad guy complex in professional wrestling. Guy ends up with a serious crack problem, alcohol problem, to the point where he's appearing later on in life after he's already told the public about his alcoholism. He's still suffering, and he's showing up to a match drunk. During my younger years, 36 now, but 19, 20, 21, and that was after training, that was after learning how to hit the bag, it was after learning how to lift and actually doing my own press of 365 on a squat 1 rep at the age of 18, being very strong pound for pound for my weight. I felt what power was, but I also knew what was going on inside me when I went on the bender for a few years, and there was some self-abuse. Having survived that, I have a little bit of expertise talking to some of you that are older wrestlers about self-pity and how that false ego trap will eat you up inside unless you are tapped into your true self. So you see a lot of these suffering older wrestlers, the painkillers, the steroids, the self-abuse that want to hold on, because we're going to talk about the Warrior, because I've been studying him for years, the late Ultimate Warrior. That desire to be on top again, to hear the cheering fans. You know, it is like that rush that they get is like a rush that they're getting from an artificial substance. And so men are still enslaved. If they've had that taste of that fame, that juicy orange, that sense of power, we've seen what it does to Hulk Hogan. What it's done to his life. It's destroyed his life. We know that Hulk Hogan is a laughingstock, as well as a person that's become a very well-known celebrity who obviously is more than likely still on the juice. And you think about all the different health problems that Hogan is more likely to face in his later years in life. Not to wish that on him, but just what we know about him and what he represents, that train that just keeps artificially going, like the economy that hasn't begun to recover yet with all its artificial stimulus. Hulk Hogan is like a metaphor for what's going on with the Fed. Okay, so going from Hulk Hogan to the Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior was clearly a very popular, charismatic character that represented that raw, intense energy that got the job done. And the Ultimate Warrior on YouTube for several years while living in New Mexico in what appeared to be a semi-grounding experience for him. He was purging a lot regarding his experience in the wrestling business and exposing what some people might call the secrets, or some of the rumors, especially with regards to Hulk Hogan. And I observed in those tapes what he wasn't saying about Vince McMahon, and what he wasn't saying about professional wrestling and the mind control aspects of that, getting specific. He was being very broad, and he made a few suggestions that he was saving the very juicy aspects for a future book. Something that I identify with as well, the unwritten book that hasn't been made. I'm going to put it into a book. Spilling some of the beans, but not quite sharing everything when he had the time. And I believe he should have. But why did the Ultimate Warrior not spill the beans on everything he knew about the WWE, Vince McMahon, the mind control aspects of the WWE? We talked about that Hogan leading that degenerate class. What do you mean, Ultimate Warrior? Get specific. He never did, because he had reservations. He held back. We could see in 2012, because he was always attached to the Ultimate Warrior persona and was involved in litigation in court with the WWE over the rights to his name. So he could run around legally be the Ultimate Warrior, which other wrestlers saw as a little bit odd, a little bit egotistical. And I happen to agree that his ego and his attachment to that identity and his desire to hear the cheering again, which I already described, that rush, he wanted that rush back. And so he made another deal with the devil, and we're talking about Vince McMahon. And the steps that led to him coming into the video game, coming into the virtual reality of the WWE, getting money again, energy from the WWE, some sort of business arrangement. Of course, think about things from the perspective of WWE, even though they did the Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD. Search terms, people looking up Ultimate Warrior, they see Ultimate Warrior is money. Vince McMahon could, see how, okay, well, Ultimate Warrior did not hold up his end of the bargain and show up for those matches in 90, 91, those games that were going on. But the Ultimate Warrior clearly is a product that can be monetized in new ways. And so, and I am speculating at this point forward, you have the Ultimate Warrior being inducted before he's killed into the WWE Hall of Fame. You have the DVD, which you cannot watch for free. There is no pirated version of it. You could see the power of the WWE and how it will go after videos that feature their content. That's why we're not using any imagery from the WWE in this video. We will not be doing that. I've seen what that has done to other people's channels. I mean, they take that stuff very seriously. Their money, the numbers, every dollar. We're talking about serious bean counting and media monopoly for those search terms, the monopoly over the Ultimate Warrior image. And so we look at the Warrior returning to the lair, if you will, after everything that he said about them and Hogan and what things are really like, and then making promises later on to tell the whole story in an autobiography. So here we have the Ultimate Warrior, who doesn't, in my opinion, look all that healthy, returning to the WWE and the Hall of Fame, limping around. And, you know, it's possible maybe he was back on the juice or suffering some of the later health consequences that do come with artificially boosting up your body when, you know, frankly, you're too old to do that, you know. And the Ultimate Warrior was very critical of Hogan and people that obviously were too old to be playing certain characters. In some ways, I don't think that he took his own advice. The question is, what really killed the Ultimate Warrior? Because the day after that Hall of Fame speech, for those of you that don't know, he had a heart attack. And what is the most eerie of all, in a industry in which there was already a lot of rumors about Vince McMahon, already a lot of satanic symbolism and satanic characters, I mean openly, promoting domestic violence, you know, promoting certain things, rituals before a live studio audience. Here comes the Ultimate Warrior, who acts like he's going in a channel from his regular personality into the Warrior, puts on the mask, and basically talks about the idea of becoming immortalized, beyond human, if you will, a legend in the minds of the audience. So you have all these audience members that are worshiping the Ultimate Warrior character. This is so occultic, in my opinion. This is so cryptic, what he said and what happened, and in light of what the WWE is. He's talking about someone becoming immortalized through being worshipped. And it was as if, and I'm not saying it was, but the man that played the Ultimate Warrior, he himself went on stage, did the mask thing, and talked about being immortalized, and he's dead the next day. There's also a speech he gave, not as the Ultimate Warrior, but as Jim, as his real self. And in that speech, it's not that he slammed Vince McMahon, it's that he got a lot of stuff off his chest that he had already alluded to. So it was like kind of a roast of Vince McMahon in kind of a safe zone. And then, of course, there's the footage of Hulk Hogan walking up to the Ultimate Warrior and saying, "Hey, bro, I'm real sorry, bro. You know, for all that stuff I did to you and all those games I played to stay number one because I'm a psychopath. I'm sorry, bro." You know, so there's that awkward moment. The Ultimate Warrior goes back to his home. This is after they finished the DVD, which is being sold by the WWE. They are selling a DVD featuring the Warrior, featuring clips of him the day before his death that were shot and the days leading up to. And again, you have the video game sales of 2012, 2013, this video game that came out featuring the Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior isn't reaping the benefits from that. Vince McMahon is. Now, with the Ultimate Warrior being immortalized, being a legend, a top search term, and growing for years. And also, another contributing factor for that is the wrestlers today suck. They literally play the role of degenerate, Chris Rock style white trash. And that's being promoted and marketed. Just like Alex Jones, by the way, went turncoat and used to put out truth. Now he's just spewing fucking pro-Trump crap. Is there any reason why there is a Trump appearance on the WWE itself? Think about this shit. Donald Trump on the WWE and all these other evil characters that have involved themselves with the WWE. And there's Mike Tyson, and there's the role that Stone Cold Steve Austin plays. And I can go on and on and on with these different degenerate, you know, bastard, you're fired type of characters that they've brought out. But the story of the Ultimate Warrior is something that other wrestlers should take notice of. Okay, there are many wrestlers that have come and gone out of the business to go on YouTube and do a shoot interview on what it was like in the locker room with Macho Man Randy Savage, or somebody getting an open hand slap. A lot of the wrestling fans, even though some of the stuff is entertaining, their level of imagination, their inquisitive nature, it's like in the toilet with uh, the most ridiculous type of drama and backstage rumors and nonsense. And very few wrestlers have actually come out to spill the beans on what they really learned from the inside. And the same thing could be said about RT reporters that have since left, like Abby Martin and Adam Kokesh. The same could be said about some people that have left, the world of Alex Jones, Infowars.com, and Austin, Texas. Those employees have to sign a confidentiality agreement. They're kept under control through contract. To not talk about the inner workings of the Infowars enterprise. And so, today, you have a Vince McMahon with a company that he has taken to the top with no other competition. And you have this bread and circus reality that is imitating life. And we see life and the violence in the real world imitating often what is being programmed into those people. It is something that's beyond description that I can provide. What it's been put out in recent years is by far more worse than what was put out 10 years ago and 20 years ago. What we can, however, is learn that the very people that young Americans are conditioned to worship themselves have ended up with lives of wreckage, divorce, drug addiction, and playing a role in serving the system, whether it be the military, or whether it be banking, whether it be the WWE. People can learn something from some of these wrestlers. You can be on top for a little bit, but if you're involved in deception, which some call black magic, and deceiving the masses, and you're involved in playing your role in that mass media mind control game, there are repercussions. That's why you've seen so many wrestlers end up as drug addicts and alcoholics, because they played their part in the deception, in the control of our minds. The same thing applies to everybody else that has somehow involved themselves with the system or structure, involved in hurting others, involved in propaganda, involved in false marketing, involved in all those things. They can learn that these people that at one point were stars, and not just wrestlers, but also TV stars, when they're involved in this mass media spell upon humanity, all these TV addicts, you look at all these child stars, you look at how many of them have ended up suicidal or in jail or addicted to something because of some void that they never filled. So, in conclusion here, this video has gone on long enough. Whether someone has served in the military and they have PTSD, or they've served in the World Wrestling Federation, they're suffering from drug addiction, or, they've been involved in banking and now they're addicted to sex or some other stuff. Man, who knows what the issue is? But to right one's wrongs should be what people are looking at. Veterans, for example, could be exposing what the military is doing. They could rise above their own pain of what happened to them and actually seek to inform other people that are still in that matrix. Maybe prevent someone young from also falling into that same type of a system. Wrestlers could be exposing what's going on with wrestling, what they see in the script. Not be so general, in hopes that Vince McMahon may later put him into a video game or a Hall of Fame. Fuck that shit. You only live once. You all these wrestlers that are holding their breath, thinking, holding out for Daddy Vince McMahon. They need to grow up and become actual tough guys and speak about what they're really seeing. So whatever the situation is, people have been wronged, fucked over, had their health screwed up. Help others that are in the same situation, and don't just be another, individual that's playing their life like a victim, wishing they were young again and on top again. Learn from your experiences and seek to help others. That is the way. That is the way towards self-healing. That is the way towards higher consciousness. That is the way to rise up out of the circumstances that you're in.